Hi, I'm Gordon from Camera Labs, and this is my review of the Fujifilm XF 33mm f1.4 RLMWR, a bright standard prime lens for X-mount mirrorless cameras. Announced in September 2021 and costing $799 or £699, it delivers standard coverage, roughly equivalent to 50mm on full frame, while the bright f1.4 focal ratio provides plenty of opportunities for shallow depth of field effects. Meanwhile, the LM and WR in the title refer to linear focusing motors and weather resistance. The XF33 may be Fujifilm's first prime in the series with this exact focal length, but it's actually their fourth X-mount lens to deliver roughly standard coverage, and doesn't officially replace any previous models. The original XF35 1.4 was one of the first lenses to launch the X system back in 2012, and while it lacks weather resistance and is no longer the sharpest tool in the box, it's still loved by its owners for attractive rendering, fairly compact size, and you can pick it up for around $599 or about £529. Meanwhile, the XF35mm f2 was launched in 2015 as a smaller, more affordable alternative, losing a stop of aperture but gaining weather resistance, and also still on sale for around $399 or £. As R lenses, all three sport manual aperture rings, but none of them have optical stabilization. Then there's the XC35mm f2, part of a simpler budget series pitched below the XF models, launched in 2020 and costing $199 or just £169. There's also plenty of third-party options, most recently the Sigma 30 1.4 DCDN, launched in early 2022, albeit based on a design from 2016. It costs around $339 or £289, and I've made a separate review of it, directly comparing it against the XF33 1.4 if you're interested. So Fujifilm's latest standard prime lens is the most expensive of its siblings, and in this review I'll show you what it's capable of, make some direct comparisons against the compact XF35 f2, and ultimately help you decide if it justifies the asking price. At 67 by 74mm and weighing 360 grams, the 33 1.4 is the heftiest of the three standard XF primes, roughly double the weight of both the 35 1.4 and 35 f2 models, and noticeably longer too. Working backwards from the front of the lens, there's a 58mm filter thread, smooth, free spinning motor assisted focusing ring, a clicky aperture ring with a lockable A position for body-based control, and a rubber grommet to seal at the mount. Here's the XF33 1.4 on the left, with the compact XF35 f2 on the right, and the difference in overall size is striking. If you have one of the smaller Fujifilm bodies or simply desire the least obstructions on an X Pro optical viewfinder, you'll feel most comfortable using these smaller f2 lenses. Place the equally new XF23 1.4 on the left, with the XF33 on the right though, and you'll see Fujifilm's latest pair of premium lenses share very similar build, size and styling. To put the lenses in perspective, here's the XF33 1.4 mounted on an XS10 body and now fitted with its supplied cylindrical lens hood, before switching to the XF35 f2. Note that the smaller lens may also have a dedicated aperture ring, but unlike the 33 1.4, its A position for body-based control is not lockable. And now here's the little lens with its tiny hood, clearly providing much less shade, but also substantially smaller. Okay, now for my tests, starting with focusing on the XF33 1.4 mounted on an XS10 body and using a central AF area in AFS mode. Here the linear motors are driving the focusing system quickly, quietly and confidently, with a brief contrast wobble at each end to confirm. For comparison, here's the XF35 f2, proving it too can focus essentially as fast as its premium sibling, albeit with less glass to shift back and forth during the process. So a good result from both lenses. And they were also essentially silent in operation. Next, back to the XF33 1.4, but this time for movie AF with a central AF area and in continuous autofocus. Here the refocusing between the bottles is smooth and silent with no overshooting or wobbling to confirm, although like my other tests with X bodies of the same generation, there's often a pause between pulls as if it lacks the confidence to complete the process in one step. This is a body-based issue though, not the lens. To confirm this, here's the XF35 f2, again showing much the same performance, equally smooth, quiet and lacking any wobbles, but again pausing halfway through most of its pulls as if to reassure itself. Again, a body, not a lens issue. Next for focus breathing, starting with the XF33 1.4, manually focusing from infinity to the closest distance and back again. Sorry for the wobbly view, but the important part is the change in magnification, which here is pretty mild, just a very small reduction in the field of view as you focus from the furthest to the nearest. Now let's switch it for the XF35 f2, and as I turn the focusing ring from infinity to the closest distance, you'll see a much greater magnification in the image. And in fact, you'll see that field of view continue to reduce as I keep turning the manual focusing ring. Again, sorry for the wobbles, I had to keep letting go and turning that ring again and again. So in terms of focus breathing, the more expensive 33 1.4 behaves much better than the compact f2 lens. Right, now for sharpness across the frame with a distant subject, and as always I've angled the view so that details run into the corners. I'll start with Brighton Pier, photographed with the XF33 1.4, here, wide open at f1.4, and when you take a close look in the middle, the lens is resolving a tremendous amount of fine detail, as you'd hope for a new lens at this price point. Next, let's keep the 33 1.4 at f1.4 on the left, and bringing the XF35 f2 at f2 on the right. Here I'd say the results are almost identical, although the little lens on the right is operating one stop slower, so let's now switch the 33 1.4 on the left for a version taken at f2 to match their apertures. I'd say the 33 on the left has improved a fraction to slightly overtake the f2 model on the right, but when both are closed one stop further to f2.8, the lens on the right looks a little more contrasty to me. But this is serious pixel peeping at very high magnification. Both lenses are performing well in the middle of their frames, even at their maximum apertures, and represent a step up in contrast and sharpness over the original 35 1.4. Returning to the 33 1.4 image wide open, once again at f1.4, let's head into the corner where you'll see the lens remains impressively sharp with only a little darkening due to vignetting. Introduce the XF35 f2 on the right and you'll immediately notice how the cheaper lens is noticeably softer in the corners than its pricier and newer sibling. Close the 33 1.4 to f2 and its result improves even further with a mild boost in sharpness and a lifting of the vignetting. Close both lenses to 2.8 and you'll see the cheaper 35 f2 on the right improve a little bit, but still remain well behind the 33 1.4 on the left. So while both lenses share similar sharpness in the centre of their frames, the newer 33 1.4 takes the lead in the corners, especially at large apertures. Although much of this is also down to having a flatter field, if you were to focus the 35 f2 in the corner, its performance would improve. Next for portrait test, starting with the XF33 1.4, wide open to 1.4, where you can see it capturing a sharp subject with an attractive blurred background. But how much less blurry is the cheaper XF35 f2? Here's the 33 on the left and the 35 on the right, with one stop of aperture between them. And while the 33 1.4 on the left definitely has a shallower depth of field, the 35 f2 on the right still has a reasonable degree of separation. Taking a closer look at their subject details shows both lenses are very crisp in the middle of their frames. I've got no complaints and no preference in terms of the subject. In terms of their background rendering, the 33 1.4 on the left is unsurprisingly a little creamier and less busy, but the 35 f2 on the right isn't at all bad, so a closer result here than you might have thought. To better reveal any differences in rendering, here's my close-up bokeh ball test shot from the same distance with both lenses. Here's the 33 1.4 wide open at 1.4, where the subject in the middle is nice and crisp, surrounded by bokeh blobs with minimal outlining, but some faint onion ring textures within, especially towards the edges. Place the 33 1.4 on the left at 1.4, and the XF35 f2 on the right at f2, and you'll notice the latter has a softer subject, but that its bokeh balls are actually bigger than you might expect, and this is down to the greater magnification at close range from focus breathing as I showed earlier. So here it's actually working to its advantage. Now the shapes may be more elongated, but arguably have slightly fainter pans within. Certainly the rendering result from the 33 1.4 on the left isn't the slam dunk I expected over its cheaper sibling. But as well as a sharper subject, the 33 1.4 does have one ace card up its sleeve, and that is the ability to focus 5 cm closer than the 35mm f2. So here's the 33 1.4 on the left versus the 35 f2 on the right, both now at their closest focusing distances respectively. This in turn has allowed the 33 on the left to deliver bigger blobs. Do you have a preference between them in terms of rendering though? And now it's time for my final verdict, where as always I'll show a selection of images I took with the 33 1.4 lens, here mounted on an XS10 body. If you'd like a closer look, you can access many of the original images via my review of the lens at cameralabs.com. The Fujifilm XF 1.4 LMWR becomes the best performing standard lens for the X system to date, delivering sharp details across the frame with the aperture wide open and at both distant and close range. The rendering of background blur may not be the cleanest I've seen, but remains attractive, and when coupled with the fairly close minimum focusing distance, provides plenty of opportunities for shallow depth of field effects. The focusing is fast, the breathing minimal, and the build quality also good, although in line with other recent Fujifilm lenses it's become larger and heavier than the models before it. Plus it's also comfortably the most expensive standard lens in the series. The original XF 1.4 provides an interesting alternative, a little smaller, lighter and cheaper with a different rendering character that you may actually prefer, but it lacks weather sealing and is nowhere near as sharp, especially as you move away from the middle. Personally speaking, I'd pay the extra for the new 33, but your mileage may vary. For me though, the most serious alternative is actually the compact XF 35f2, which matched the premium lens for sharpness in the middle of the frame, delivered surprisingly similar rendering, similar focusing speed, and is comfortably smaller, lighter and almost half the price. Now, it did fall behind the 33 on focus breathing and corner sharpness at large apertures, but if neither of these factors are critical, or if you can stop down for better performance in the corners, then it is a great choice for the money. Ultimately, the XF 1.4 is an excellent all-round performer if you want the best quality standard lens for the X-mount system to date, but do compare the XF 35mm f2 closely, as it may do everything you desire in a more compact and affordable package. That's it for this lens review. Thanks for watching it to the end. If you found it useful, please do consider giving it a like and also my channel a follow, as both really help me continue making these videos. Let me know which is your favourite general purpose X series lens in the comments. Check out some of my other reviews, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.